Hello, everybody. I want to bring you this one. There's been a lot of talk about various things in the media, and I wanted to bring it kind of in the realm of a realization. All right, you've all heard of different organizational disorders, various identity disorders. Uh, One that's being kicked around is a sexual disorder where you want to flip flop sexes for some crazy ass reason. There are people who have dissociative identity disorders, which run into every category you can imagine. People overtly exposed to religion, people overtly exposed to you name it. There's various sexual disorders where you become a nympho. This is all in the classification disorder, various things of that nature. So, what I wanted to do, and along with these organizational disorders, and basically they stem from an OCD type trauma or something that allows them to hoard uh, various things of that nature. Um, this is actually going to be about something called governmental identity disorder. And I'm going to get into this in a minute. I've seen it written a little bit different, but with the way the world is right now, I don't think I'm going to find it in the National Psychiatric uh, website or anything else. But basically, what this is it's one of those disorders where it's an organizational, personal, and disorder. Basically, like I said, people who hoard things basically had traumas where they had nothing. Now they can afford things, so they hoard things. People who, like I said, overtly religious. What do? Well, they seek religious repentance for crazy, stupid minor things. And they actually put money into a bowl which has nothing to do with God to basically wipe their sins away, etc., etc., etc. It's a nice scam, but it's not what I'm into. I am actually a pagan by nature. I actually am. And I'm going to get into the government identity disorder in a minute, but the reason I am is because I don't believe in the scams that everybody's running. I believe any money I make should be mine, and that's it. I should be able to spend it how I want and not have to do anything crazy. But let me get into this for you because I've seen this on various websites over the years, and I've never actually printed it out. This is classified as an organizational identity disorder. This would be with your sexual, your racial, your governmental, your personality disorders. Sexuals being anything from the transgender hype that's in the media to the nymphomania, which majority of us are going, she's an nympho? To personality things like hoarding and other things. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I've taken a couple classes here and there, but from what I understand, it's basically an antisocial DID-based organizational disorder. It's brought on specifically governmental identity disorder. Is actually something that doesn't happen to a lot of people, but you're seeing a lot more in the media, and it's actually becoming a very big oh shit, you know. And what it is, it's basically like many of these other mental uh, disorders, where there's generally a trauma or attachment that is severely broken or severe in some way, and then somebody basically attaches themselves to that lifestyle. It's like if you take up drinking after a loved one passes, well, the loved one passes, they're not coming back, so your drinking helps cover that. Well, you have a traumatic event, you got to do one thing versus another, you learn about this and that. So I don't have my internet running, and I'm trying to do this all from from a piece of paper here. Okay? But basically what this is, it's a traumatic attachment disorder. Like many OCD-based, it's much like hoarding, workaholics, people take up drinking after a dead relative. And basically, there's various forms of narcissism, attachment, attachment to apparel, attachment to titles, behavior similar in the spectrum, involvement in seclusive activity and behaviors with others of this disorder. I'm trying to go into the basic of the organizational disorders first before I hit governmental identity disorder, because you have to understand that regardless of whether or not you're going to actually find the title, this is an actual thing that affects a lot of people. I would imagine 4.5 million Americans suffer from this alone. You know, they say that people who are born with medical problems should be the ones that go off and become the doctors, the nurses, etc., because they've been through the system, they know what the hell's going on, they know how to do this, they know how to do that. Well, that's fine and dandy, but they don't have to. Same thing like people who have traumatic events and require firefighters to stop a fire, police to, take the arrested burglar away, whatever the situation is. And then after that, they basically hoard on the thing. They accept the call of the person and they say, oh, are you all right? Do you feel victimized? Blah, 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 blah. And then they basically draw you into the government identity disorder, offering you various things and for your accepted behavior of that traumatic event, instead of just saying, yeah, I'm working through it, goodbye, click. And like a lot of things, folks, there's varying degrees of this. There's people who find themselves one day in a uniform, and then there's people who actively seek it out, and then there's people who actually have what I would call governmental identity disorder. And what I would actually say governmental identity disorder is something that has happened to them that has given them kind of an entitlement package to basically fearmonger and shill for others. And basically it was brought up under a traumatic attachment event. Like, I don't think a car wreck would do it. But if you were involved in, I don't know, you name the events, people. I'm not even going to expand it into the horizons of what this might include or not include. But basically, these are people who, basically find themselves secluded and excluded from regular social interventions. That was my cat. Yeah, move. Thank you. And basically, from that antisocial seclusion, they find acceptance in one group or another. Some will find it in gangs. Some will find it in the bottle. Some will find it in various other things. Some people seek out government. It's not always the person in the uniform, but it's basically the people who have an experience that are basically weak-minded, and after the traumatic event, they basically feel the need that they need to continue this behavior and benefit the community by messing with others, and rather than just seeking your help, getting on some OCD meds and telling the people, no thank you, I'm not going to do this anymore. And basically, these are the people who suffer from government identity disorder, and like many other disorders, it's actually pushed into society. Dissociative identity disorders have various things, various alters, various, let me see the list here. You're not going to be able to see this, and I'm aware of. Various alters, various abuses, tendency to disassociate seems to be related to as much pathogenic family structure and attachment disorder acquired early in life. As others, I'm trying to find what I'm really looking for here. It's a word that, unfortunately, right now I cannot think up. Yes, they have dissociative amnesia symptoms. Also forgetful amnesia symptoms, things that they don't believe has happened to them, or let me get this out of the way so I can talk. So they basically have amnesia of events. You know, they run after titles and various trinkets to collect for hoarding purposes. This is an actual spectrum disorder. I forget what it's completely called, but it is a DID-based organizational disorder. Much like religious identity disorder, much like DID, it is an antisocial behavioral thing that does start generally very early on. I don't want to get into the major details of how I think it actually starts, but I would imagine it basically is something that is alluring. And, you know, hey, you know, I am such and such. If you work with me, you can be it too. Yay, government. And what this basically proclaims to is that it's basically a socialized DID-based disorder that probably majority of people who work even in the governmental fields do not have. This has nothing to do with patriotism. It has nothing to do with anything realistic. What it has to do with is your acceptance of the facts and basically your willingness to basically be an order taker, and your basically what it is it's a disorder much like hoarding, where you don't need everything in there, but it's yours anyway, so why not keep it? Well, you have a traumatic experience. It opens you up to newer things, so you want more and more experience in that until it becomes self-seclusion, until you're basically running around as a detective or something of that sort, because, you know, you got a DUI or who knows what. You know, like I said, it doesn't affect everybody, but I imagine 4.5 to a good 6 million Americans right now are suffering from governmental identity disorder or some form of this via a DID or organizational behavioral, basically OCD-based disorder based on traumatic and attachment disorders, etc. And I'm trying to work from this on the basis that I don't have to work on work off the internet. I have actually some sources here on the. Let's see here. Hang on one second. It's a black screen, I know. There we go. Didn't think this would show because the internet's out. Alright, so basically, it's a personality disorder. Medline News, National Library. It's basically of disassociation and dissociative disorders. It's basically stemming from antisocial personality disorder, types of there's types of heterosexual gender disorder, identity disorders. That's messed up, but yeah, I imagine there are. Hang on. These are not all the pictures. Oh, I know I got these. Alright, I got these on top because of the titles. So basically, it is a depersonalization disorder, which I said basically it is. It would affect mood. There is dissociative amnesia, dissociative symptoms. Multiple personality disorders are common, but definitely not functional. Here's what I was talking to you about before. The dissociative amnesia symptoms. It is an identity disorder. And while I don't believe every single person who is currently occupying a liberal job or this or that actually has this, I imagine there is quite a few. I would say north of 5 million. But it basically does stem from PTSD symptoms, DID based, uh, behavioral therapy via CBT. And like I said, folks, you have. Let me get back to what I was at. Yes, this is dissociative identity disorder, and this is a spectrum related disorder, so it fits in the category. Like I said, you have identity disorders involving everything. We've seen the news push the sexual, but it hasn't really concluded the racial, even though that one chick was crazy as hell and she looked at herself as being black when she was absolutely white. Can't tell me that's a racial identity disorder right there. They won't come out and say that. That would be crazy as fucking shit, and everybody involved would be racist. But religious identity disorders are very common. Those who are exposed to religion very young, who don't have the exposure to logic and various things of that sort, are very susceptible. People with prior traumas, prior antisocial disorder functions, prior attachments and losses of the attachment involving a trauma, are subjected to basically governmental identity disorder. That's what it is. Alright, guys. I know I'm going to get a bunch of flack for this, but I do believe this is one of them in the organizational and DID-based disorders in the spectrum. I forget what this is originally called. I think it's something with an F. I'm not certain. But it is very, very, very real. I'm not just saying, oh, look at me, I'm saying governmental identity disorder. Ah, anyone that wears a badge is affected. Ah. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that it's basically the overexposure to an event after a trauma, OCD based, and basically they reel you in after that, and then that you're basically subjected to that overt exposure, and then basically you're kind of brought in as a shill after that, and then they kind of like sit there and pay you pretty much like a snitch, and then basically it's kind of like that. And like I said, I imagine of probably the nearly, I'd say 50 million government employees, contractors, full-time, part-time, you name it. I would say a good, I said 5 million, but I'd say 20 million probably suffer from this. I would look at this as the supreme liberal mental disorder. I would. If I was a psychiatrist and I saw these guys walking in with this shit, they'd be out. It'd be over. Done. And it's as much an attachment to the paycheck than it is the job, too. And it is very bad when you do have a DID-based or religious identity disorder or any type of OCD, bipolar type thing. And just like people who are overexposed to religion, people who are overexposed to government is the same thing. They say, why don't, crackheads and stuff like that get off the welfare system? Well, it's a government disorder. You relied on them for so fucking long, pardon my language, that it has become a disorder. Why hasn't John, who works in the Pentagon's computing, retired? Well, he's worked there for so long, why should he? And, Susie had had somebody running through the neighborhood naked. Now she's becoming a police officer for it. I don't know. I'm just making shit up at that point. But you get the idea, folks. And basically, I do look at this as real. I'm not going to say that every police officer that puts on a badge or firefighter that goes to work or EMT or etc. has this, but I'm going to say that majority of people probably are overtly exposed to government and probably suffer from at least some form of this. You know, it's all about those order takers. You know what that rhymes with? Undertaker. And I do believe that governmental identity disorder is real. And this is the closing part, you know, it is a DID, RID based, similar to a DID, antisocial disorder, you know, you would see in anywhere, you know, psychiatrically, it would be in the classifications of the hoarding, the personality, the governmental, the racial, and the sexual disorders. That's exactly what it is. Anything that you're overtly exposed to eventually becomes your crutch, basically. And that's what you're exposed to, so you get into seclusive clubs with people with the same titles, the same this, the same that. You get the idea. And those are the people, ladies and gentlemen, who have this to the nth degree that it's no longer about the badge or the title. It is about the service to, you know, the agenda. It's a service to the bankers. It's the service to, not even about the paycheck. It's basically the brainwashing is what it is. And just like you have alcoholics, you have people who fiend off governmental stuff like this too. All right, guys. I want to bring you this. I don't like doing these very much, but I saw this and I decided to put it up there. This isn't going to be the only thing. I'm going to put up 2 or 3 more videos hopefully today. But I wanted to get this out there just to get it on paper. Thanks, guys.